Hello there, my name is Mr. Wright. I'm the Director of English and Communications, which covers English and Geography. Now, this first presentation is on English language and English literature, starts with Year 11, then going on to Year 13. So, the exam content for English language covers two exams. They're both 1 hour 45 and they're both worth 80 marks each. The first one, responding to fiction, is an extract from usually a novel. It can be the start of the novel or a start of a chapter, and questions basically comprehension, language, structure. And then question 5, which is worth half of the marks for the paper, which is a descriptive or narrative piece of work. Paper 2, the other exam for English language, is usually a couple of articles or letters that are non-fiction, so from real life. Questions about, again, language, about writers' attitudes, viewpoints, comparisons of the content. And then the last part of the exam, again, it's worth half of that paper, is either an article, a letter, an essay, or a speech. It's more than likely it'll be an article or a letter. They do tend to dominate. So what you've got is for the questions for paper 1. Question 1 is worth 4 marks. It's list 4 things. It's a very easy question, just 4 sentences, just finding information basically. Question 2 is about the writer's use of language, so how they use words and the effect they have, the connotations and ideas around them. Question 3 is where a lot of students need to work. It's about structure, about how a writer puts their ideas together. So it can be an effective ending. Have we got any twists or turns? It can be, have we got a change of focus? Is there a change of mood? So tone can be in there, but it can be a lot of different things. I think that's why students find it a little difficult. That's only worth 8 marks. Question 4 is very important. It's evaluation statement, where it's finding evidence and explaining. It's not difficult to do, but it's important that students actually get there and finish it. A lot in the past have dropped marks by not completing that question, rushing to question 5. As I said, question 5 is a descriptive or a narrative. We tend to try and focus on descriptive because narratives do tend to get rushed to endings and be quite unsophisticated at times, whereas description doesn't naturally have to have build up to an ending. It can be basically the quality of the language used. Paper 2 is very similar. We get 4 marks at the beginning with true or false statements. It's just 4 boxes that have got to be shaded in. Question 2 is perhaps the trickiest that people find. It gives you something to look at, a theme, and what you need to do is comparing the 2 articles, how this is presented and why it's different. But that's one we have to do a lot of work on before the exam. Question 3 is another language question, the same as question 2 on paper 1, but it's worth 12 marks this time. So if they can do question 2 on paper 1, they can certainly do question 3 on paper 2. Question 4 is a comparison question. Worth 16 marks, so it's quite an important one, but it tends to be about the writer's attitudes, how they're different, how they present their attitudes, thoughts and feelings. And as I've said, question 5 is speech, letter, article, leaflet and essay. We've never had a leaflet as far as I know on that. I don't think we've had essays, but it tends to be, as I've said, a letter or an article. Right, onto English literature content. For this year, it's changed a little bit. We've had one of the sections dropped, but the good news is that the exams are much shorter as a result. So the first paper is the Anthology of Poetry. We do the love and relationships section. It's 15 poems that have been covered in class at least twice and then in revision, and that's worth 30 marks. There will be a poem in the exam paper. There'll be a theme given to be compare that poem to a poem of your choice. So students need to know their second poems so they can compare them to the first. The second section of the first paper is the modern prose or drama. Students will either do Blood Brothers or Lord of the Flies. So we've got at least one class that are covering Lord of the Flies as well as a second option. All classes will have covered Blood Brothers, so it's a fallback option even for those that do Lord of the Flies. but there's lots of revision materials available around those. So paper 2 is the compulsory section. We've got Macbeth, the Shakespeare text. That's 1 hour 45 minutes to paper 2, so slightly longer, but all four English exams are 1 hour 45, apart from paper 1 literature, which is just 5 minutes shorter. So it's a lot better in terms of timing this year. Now, section B on paper 2 for literature is unseen poetry. So we get a poem that in theory the students have never seen before. They answer questions on that, and then there's a second poem for just a short 8-mark question. It's usually a comparison between the two poems. That's very important because a lot of students miss that last one out. If we can cover that one, then it'll be an advantage to us. So those are the 4 exams then overall for English language and English literature. In terms of key dates, there'll be mock assessments on the week commencing the 22nd of November for Year 11. That will be the grey block on the left. It will be an English language paper 1 in full. Okay, so we've done those in class. We've had a few goes at assessments, and it'll be to see what students need more, where they're struggling, where they need a little bit more guidance, a bit more intervention. It's likely to be, it's going to be question 3, the structure that usually turns up as the problem one. There's then another mock on the 14th of March. That will be a language paper 2 and also one of the literature papers. We will cover all of the papers within lessons and non-formal assessments, but that will be a very important exam in terms of diagnosis. Interventions for English will be Wednesdays, period 7, so after school on a Wednesday. And as you can see, we've got the dates there that are provisional, but I think they're fairly reliable. English language paper 1 is on the 18th of May. English literature paper 1, the 25th of May. And then we jump to the 8th of June, I believe, for English literature paper 2. And then English language paper 2 is on the 10th of June. So there's a good amount of time between them, probably in case of any exams missed or anything COVID related. So we will update if they need changing, but that's what we've got at the moment. So in terms of revision for English and English literature, on Microsoft Teams, we'll be building up through the year our folders for past papers, example essays, all the general resources and revisions that are needed. And for literature in particular, that's the one that needs the most revision. We can cover the narrative, we can cover the characters, the themes, but for those extras, students really do need to know the text well. If we do get, like in Macbeth or in the poetry, if you do get the actual text in front of you, you need to be able to know what's going on in that text. So revision's really important. Students do need to do the extra bits out of school. We have got Seneca, where we set tasks throughout the year, and that's online content, so it's much more easily accessible and quicker to do, but it's good for revision of quotes and for testing comprehension and making sure that students know their stuff. In terms of textbooks, Mr. Loftus has got a list of texts from us that will be distributed, but obviously if you want to get in touch for the emails at the end, then you're welcome to. We tend to use CGP York Notes more than anything, but we have got some specific to text that we can share. With paper 1 reading for revision, what can be done casually, and parents can help with this, is if you read the first page of a novel, just pick up a novel. It can be of any level, preferably young adult to adult fiction, but basically go through it and apply the paper 1 skills. Have a read through. How is the character presented? How is the setting presented? What words stand out? How is it structured? Does the reader know everything that's going on? Have we got a few mysteries? Is there anything that suggests things later happening? And that's a really useful tool, just randomly picking up a book, opening it up at the beginning or the start of a chapter and trying to apply those skills. For paper 2, I use the term quality newspapers, but it is useful if we have websites that are reliable, any newspaper articles online from the better quality newspapers with a little bit more content, because paper 2 does tend to be about issues. It can be world issues, it can be recycling, it can be cars and pollution, it can be snow, it can be all kinds of things. But remember, what students will have to do is do letters and articles, which are kind of newspaper based. If it's a letter, it will say, write to your local newspaper or write to a newspaper about this issue. So as long as students are reading things that challenge them, I mean, not massively challenge them, but as long as they're raising their vocab level, finding some words they don't understand, perhaps looking them up, adding them to their vocabulary, because paper 2 question 5 is mimicking what happens in newspapers and letters most of the time. So if we've got that kind of tone and the vocab level and the devices that are used there, it really will help students. There's also films for literature texts. They're generally available. We can point to some DVDs or anything like that, but I think most of these things are available online on YouTube, places like that. So we've got Macbeth, Blood Brothers, Lord of the Flies. For the poetry as well, there are lots of versions of the poems being read out and studied by various people, including, I forget his name, the chap who was always on. There's a Mr. Salles and a Mr. Brough, that's it, Mr. Brough. He tends to do a lot, but some of his stuff can be quite controversial in terms of meaning, where some reject it, some really embrace it. Also, there's the internet as a tool. Okay, different views about the characters, the text, the messages in novels and texts that we cover. As long as it's something reliable and useful, then any different ideas are welcomed, because examiners do want to see something different from students. Okay, that's the end of the year 11 and moving on to the year 13. So for the course content for literature, we'd say year 13 as we come to the end of the course. We've got the paper 1, which is Othello. We've got Arthur Miller, Death of a Salesman, and then the John Keats poetry. That covers paper 1, the aspects of tragedy. For paper 2, it's crime writing, where we've got unseen crime extracts. We've got the Anthology of Poetry that students will have studied by then. We've got the novel, Ian McEwan, Atonement, and we've got Hamlet, which we've added onto there. So a lot of very traditional text within that. So paper 1 is 75 marks. It's 40% of the A level. It's a passage from a Shakespeare text, an essay question on a Shakespeare text, and one essay question linking the two texts. For paper 2, it's a 3-hour exam, 75 marks again, it's 40% of the A level. And we've got an unseen passage, we've got one essay question on the set text, and one essay question which connects two texts. And the text basically can be chosen by the students at that point, depending on which essays they can fit them to. Then the other remainder of the marks is a 20% for the NEA, the coursework section, which is done well before the exam, and it's a good base for students to make progress on. So they basically have a lot of choice over what they're going to study, and Miss Cardell's done a lot of work in making sure that they get some very good marks to begin with, even before they start the exam. So the key dates, the mock assessments are the same as the year 11 ones. We've got the 22nd of November for the first mocks, and the 14th of March, the week commencing, for the second mocks. And the exams, we've got the 7th of June for paper 1 and the 20th of June for paper 2 for A level. Again, revision, pretty similar to GCSE. We've got lots on Microsoft Teams and more is going to be added. We've got the Seneca for online content. We've got the National Theatre resources for Othello, Death of a Salesman and Hamlet. There are the films for literature text, particularly Atonement. Internet research, the British Library's got an awful lot of resources. That's really expanded recently. There's also the idea of reading widely across the genre. With paper 2 crime, we have noticed that students haven't got the grounding in crime fiction, detective fiction that we'd expect. They're not really au fait with it, and previous cohorts tend to have got that understanding of even watch the television programs and films of detective crime, but we do really need to work on that. And then, as usual, the revision guides. So anything else that's extra, any other information that's needed about A level or about GCSE, we've got the 3 contact details here: myself, Miss Cardell, and Miss Wigham, who'll be available for any problems, any queries, any confirmations. Okay, so organise it through school, or the emails are available. Okay, thanks for your time on that one.